Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great webinar on tap, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will be able to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for either of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions. And we should have about 10 or 15 minutes near the end to go through those audience questions. And also at the end of today's webinar, we will be doing a drawing for 3 $50 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our lucky winners. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is Progressive Delivery, Feature Flags for Experimentation. Our speakers today are James Governor, who is analyst and co-founder of Redmonk, and he's going to be joined by Erez Rusovsky, who is Director of Product Management at CloudBees. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much.
Right.
Okay, so I will be kicking off with a really somewhat of a high-level look at some changes we're seeing in the software delivery marketplace, and particularly some new opportunities that are being realized by some of the leading companies, some of the elite software delivery organizations, and really what can we learn from them, and how can we make our software delivery mechanisms, processes more effective. And I think particularly it's this notion of experimentation. So I'm a big coffee fan. I love really good espresso. And when I go into a coffee shop, sometimes I'm like, you know what? Wow, look, they've got these two amazing coffees. They've got a Costa Rican coffee. They've got an Ethiopian coffee. It's natural process, and I'd like to have a choice. So why can't I try both of these coffees, choose which one I like best, and then make that my selection? This kind of notion is found a lot in the world of content marketing, A/B testing, where you're really coming at the world from the perspective of what works best. There isn't only one experience. You're absolutely thinking from a content perspective, how do I improve conversions? Sometimes it'll be changing where the button is. Sometimes it'll be changing the color of something or a call to action. But there's very much a world of a more sort of analytics-driven sort of set of processes to do with web content and web content management. Now, obviously thinking about conversion rates and CRO, there are a particular set of software vendors around that. There's a world that is very much, it's a marketing sort of purchase. So that's marketing, thinking about how do we bring people to our website and make them buy things. Now, in the world of software delivery, we're increasingly more sophisticated in having pipelines. We've moved beyond just thinking about, okay, we've got some unit testing. We're going to do continuous deployment, and the changes we make in source code are going to be tested, and then the build is done automatically for us. That's fine. But increasingly in the sort of world of Git, we've probably got 3 or 4 teams making changes. We are moving forward to trunk-based development and thinking about, well, hang on a minute. We're actually in a position where, could we take an approach where we begin to identify those experiences, those applications and services that suit the developer best. So think about the pipeline, breaking it down and really coming at that from the perspective of could we do the kinds of things that we've been doing in content marketing, but with software delivery? And the key here really is that today, the notion of deployment being the same as release is breaking down. The software developer can deploy something, but somebody else, the product manager, the product owner, is the person that actually releases that and activates that as a service. Deployment and release have been decoupled. And really a key enabler of this is this world of sort of fancy if-then statements and the world of feature flags. So when we look at certainly the web giants, they do this all the time. They'll build up feature flags, and they'll give one set of users a particular experience before they roll it out to everyone else. Now, I've taken this notion of feature flags, A/B testing, really understanding the blast radius of a service as it's rolled out and beginning to have better metrics in order to decide what the experience should look like for the user, and call this progressive delivery. This doesn't replace the ICD, it very much builds on it, but it's about bringing the business and the software development organization together in terms of software delivery, which is, of course, delivering better experiences to end users. So Carlos Sanchez said, progressive delivery is the next step after continuous delivery, where new versions are deployed to the subset of users and evaluated for correctness in performance. But in IT, we've tended to think about availability. When we roll something out, as long as it doesn't break, that's the right service. But of course, if you're one of these leading software organizations, well, like Netflix, it's more like A/B testing. It's what is the experience like for the end user, not just is it breaking, is this a breaking change? So Charity Majors from Honeycomb, I'm a big fan. She has come up with this that she kind of agreed that this makes sense. So progressive delivery is a term that I came up with, and she's actually been wobbling around these notions of canaries. So canary deploys are where you're deploying the service to a small subset of users before you roll it out to everyone else. Validated deploy groups. There's a language that organizations like Honeycomb have been using, and so progressive delivery is a way of talking about that. And the most important thing here, I think, is fine-grained control over the blast radius. In cloud-based infrastructures, we can route traffic accordingly. So if we think about, people talk about service mesh, we've had Kubernetes, now we've got these notions around like Istio and Envoy. One of the key things there is that is about network control. And we're in a world where we can start to do things in a network, start breaking that down so that we can move and segment traffic accordingly. So I think what's interesting to me is there's a collision now happening between the world of growth hacking and the world of software delivery, and feature flags and feature management seems to be key to delivering on that. So we've got a set of interfaces that we're looking at. We need new management approaches that pull together data and really begin to start thinking about how do we bring the product managers, the designers, and everyone else into this software delivery process. So we need a more end-to-end kind of thinking. It's not just software pipelines, but really product delivery pipelines, and bringing together all of that information so that we can make better decisions in the same way that we would with growth hacking. And I think, again, I can't stress enough that the really key issue here is about collaboration between business people and IT people. Because one of the things that's happened over the last few years is it really leaned into, software delivery has to be done by the software engineers. My company, Redmonk, we talk about practitioners, software developers as the new kingmakers, because basically that deployment decision is made by engineering, which is fine, but of course the business has to be part of that. We've seen a lot of interesting conversations, someone like Lego, they took the Millennium Falcon Lego set, the biggest thing they'd ever sold, and they literally decided, the business decided that they were going to do that like as a huge single day experience in terms of getting lots and lots of customers to buy that. So that's the business making a decision about when something is deployed. But of course, if we're rolling out software, we're trying to understand these experiences, we need to close the loop. And that's where this world of observability is coming in. So traditionally, we've had this APM metrics, very, very valuable in terms of understanding the customer experience. What about the logs? What about distributed tracing in these distributed microservices architectures? We've begun to pull all of that together and really think about what does the service actually look like from the customer's perspective. Again, to quote Charity Majors, it doesn't matter if you have 5 nines availability if your user isn't happy. And that's really key. So how are we going to close the loop between the pipelines, the user experience, the features, and how they're rolled out? So if we think about observability, how are we going to do the automation in terms of delivering on these pipelines, and in particular when we begin deploying the applications in this networked world? there's a really interesting approach that has recently been getting a lot of traction, which is called GitOps. Obviously, Git is the primary mechanism for software version control today. It is well understood. Obviously, we've got GitLab, we've got GitHub, we've got a set of other vendors. Certainly CloudBees is becoming increasingly Git native. If we look at CloudBees and their delivery of, for example, Jenkins X, very much this world where automation happens basically based on source code. So if we think of the world of CI, where, yeah, you check something in, the testing was done, it made sure that it didn't break the build, and then let the user know. GitOps takes that one stage further, where basically everything is stored in Git. So that might be user IDs, for example. You might be making a service request and maintaining that in Git. Thinking about, we can't have a world of just all of the developers in the organization just SSHing in, making changes to systems. If we're going to have immutable architectures, immutable infrastructures, then basically we need a system of record for that. And increasingly we're seeing organizations make that Git. And basically it would be, if I'm going to do automation, it's going to be via pull request. And I think one of the interesting things here is, certainly if we look at software developers today, they don't want to keep on changing their flow. They only want to be in a couple of environments. They want to be in their code, well, should I say 3 environments probably. They want to be in their code editor, they want to be in GitHub or GitLab, and they want to be in Slack for communications and sharing GIFs. So the world of GitOps is an interesting approach where you're basically saying the system of record is Git, and that maps really well to the kind of new declarative infrastructures we're seeing around, for example, Kubernetes. And the key here really is about user experience. That's not something that, again, I think from a software delivery perspective, we talk about it a lot, but do we really try and understand it? Are we closing that loop? And are we able to automate and deliver changes because of the experience rather than because the application breaks? Now, this kind of world of feature flags is not necessarily new. Some organizations have been doing it for a long time. In email, for example, we had Google Labs. And if we think about that, it's like some users, if we look at the top of the slide, some users want to take advantage of new features that may indeed be unstable. They want the new hotness. That's what they're looking for. Other users are far less keen to see things that are less stable. They want the thing after a while. In fact, we've all been in that situation where, oh no, don't change my application. Why did Twitter move from 140 to 280 characters? Why did the Facebook interface change? Why has my bank changed its interface? This is annoying me. Well, what if we could put the user in charge of when, of which feature flags indeed they chose, so that an organization could say, well, actually, this is about a conversation not just between IT and the business, but also between the business and the customer, where the new application changes are things that people could opt into and opt out of. So who are some people that have kind of done this? Microsoft has done this for a long time with Microsoft Azure. Indeed, the progressive delivery notion came from a conversation I was having with a guy called Sam Guggenheimer. So they were rolling stuff out. They were all about understanding the blast radius. You might roll it out to your internal users first. You might roll it out to a particular region. I'm going to roll something out in Australia first. And what Microsoft talks about was this notion of progressive experimentation in terms of what user experiences look like. So they were really one of the companies that's been doing this for some time. And when I was talking to Sam, I was like, oh, this really makes sense. Let's give it a name for all of these new sets of approaches that we're seeing from some of the web leaders and call it progressive delivery. We want to see a Cambrian explosion of features and functions. We want to put the business in charge of deciding then which ones do we maintain and which ones do we kill off. Because we live in a world where we do have an abundance that we didn't used to have in terms of infrastructure. We used to be asking for permission about network, storage, servers, and everything else. You might have to wait 6 months before you could even try something. That's gone away today. I can spin up an Amazon Web Services instance. I can pull down some code from GitHub. I can start banging away. I might be using serverless. We don't have to ask for permission anymore. And that means there are a lot more flowers are going to bloom. But that also means, as I say, we need better automation and we need to close that feedback loop. Amazon does this stuff too. Progressive delivery is very much part of Amazon's way of thinking about the world. Obviously, they've got one of the most well managed networks in the world, and they absolutely came at it from a perspective of isolation. The one thing that Amazon doesn't want is a breaking change that runs across the entire Amazon network. For them, they want to isolate it to the region and then within region as well. So they've been very aggressive about saying, look, we need to be able to roll stuff out to a set of customers before it gets rolled out more broadly. Another organization that does this is Cloudflare. So they talk about not cattle versus pets, but dogs, pigs, and canaries. So they've got dogs, loyal customers, paying customers. They don't want to break their experience, so they don't get the experimental stuff. Canaries, they will roll something out to one city. It might be Des Moines, it might be Chicago, it might be London, it might be Berlin. Roll it out to them first, see how the experience is before they roll it out more broadly. Datadog rolls stuff out at night in Japan so that they can see how that experience is. The pigs, from a Cloudflare perspective, I think are particularly amusing because that is people that perhaps have signed up for services with a stolen credit card. And so what Cloudflare does is it gives them all the janky stuff to see what they think of it. They may not be paying for the service, but they'll still complain if they don't like it. They're a valuable source of telemetry. And so really this is about product management discipline, because IT is moving from projects in software delivery to products with product owners. And feature flags, again, is absolutely part of this bridge. Testing in production sounds scary. You know, we've got people saying, oh yeah, of course you should be able to roll out services to end users on a Friday afternoon. Why would that be a problem? Well, that's fine if you're a very, very sophisticated organization in terms of your software engineering practices, but you may not be ready for that. For a lot of enterprises, a bank, for example, the idea of delivering a new service or function to end users on a Friday afternoon is frankly terrifying. But in a sense, any time we roll out an application, we are doing testing in production. That's why we need these tools like observability, so that we can go in with a high degree of granularity in terms of that user experience and finding out exactly which components, which microservices, which serverless functions are causing a problem for the end user. And so again, I think the key here is, how do we pull all of this stuff together so we can understand experiences? We can begin to think about, could we have a geographical separation in terms of features so that we could roll it out to a particular geography first? Let's pull together all of that data and let's think about, what can we do in a world where growth hacking and software delivery really begin to kind of merge? So, growth hacking ideas in software delivery. Feature flags are the bridge. Feedback loops for observability. We've got observability and user experience. And how do we bring together these metrics? Because software delivery, user experience, and infrastructure are not separate things anymore. They're indeed the same thing. We've got different ways of looking at them, different aspects for different teams. How are we going to pull together that data? And I think what users that I see are now looking for feature flag vendors. They're looking for people that can bring them these sort of A/B testing experiences. A lot of them are built in-house, and now they're looking to standardize that and find vendors that can deliver and help them so that they can do feature management. Okay, so just before I move on, I want to say that the photos in that presentation were from Adobe stock photos. And if you like those drawings, I think they're fantastic. They're from Nina Limpy. She's got a site called Undraw. It's all free, unencumbered, freely licensed. And I think what you know, well, I love the illustrations, and I hope you enjoy them too. And perhaps you can use them in your websites. They're SVGs, and they're free. Anyway, that's me done for today, at least until the questions. Now I would like to hand you over to Erez, who's going to do a great demo and talk a bit about what CloudBees is doing in this space.
So thanks, James. Hi, everybody. This is Erez from CloudBees. I'm running I'm Director of Product Management of the Feature Management Solution in CloudBees, used to be one of the co-founders of Rollout. And I'm going to take you through a quick presentation to talk about feature flags and then show you a quick demo. And I'm going to start from the basics. So James talked a lot about the big things for feature management or feature flags, progressive delivery. And if you go to the basic and you think about what is a feature flag, and again, James said this, at the end of the day, it's an if statement. And at the bottom, you can see if payment flag is enabled, do something, otherwise do something else. And this is evolving to give you that functionality to turn on and off pieces of software in your production, in your environment. And so, kind of what we're seeing and what we believe is that in the near future, every deployment will be behind a feature flag. And this is not something that, it's just our opinion. If you look at the companies that at the bottom, they're already doing this. Some of these companies take pride in the fact that there's not a single line of code that is not gated behind the feature flag. And so we are seeing that trend happening with other companies as well. And so, again, things that James already alluded to, but just to put an emphasis on this, at the end of the day, what you want to do is separate your code deployment from your feature releases. So the code deployment is that technical aspect where you remove code or move code from one place to another place. But then the feature releases, meaning actual users getting to see that features, are decoupled from that code deployment. And so, again, feature flags have a bunch of use cases. One of them is that experimentation that James talked about. But if you have to look at kind of the main use cases and how things start with feature flags, it's basically 4 or 3 main use cases. One of them is the deployment safety, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Deployment speed, so how can I deploy faster? And then the experimentation and customization angle of software delivery. And so if you look at the deployment safety part, which is kind of the basic component, it starts from the kill switch. So having the ability to turn something off in production if it's not behaving as you want it to behave. And then, avoid that emergency release at the middle of the night, just be, safer in your delivery process. And then that's very reactive. On the other side, you have the gradual rollout. So you have a new deployment, you want to release it to everybody, you're afraid that something's going to break, gradually deploy this to your users. And again, you could control that blast radius, either percentage-wise, how many users are getting this, or just a subset of your user base, internal employees, beta users, alpha users, etc. Now, the other main use case we've seen with feature flags is the deployment speed. So, first and foremost, I think just having a better CI. Think about teams that are working together. They could decouple each other work. So that means that people can actually merge incomplete code to the main branch and release it to production without worrying. Things like moving to trunk-based development, feature flags are instrumental in helping teams move to that thing. Again, avoiding long-lived feature branches. And then the other thing is release predictability. Imagine late-stage QA bugs instead of not releasing and postponing your release, just in getting that predictability, say, okay, we found a bug, let's turn that off, continue with the release cycle. And of course, testing in production. And so the last use case, there's actually 2 use cases here, experimentation and customization. On the experimentation side, it's important to understand that there's 2 aspects of this. There's the engineering side. So I release something, how do I measure if this is doing any damage to my environment? So crashes, errors, things that engineers cares about. And then also there's the experimentation angle, which is kind of the user stuff. So is this performing better on my business KPIs? Is my conversion better or worse? And feature flags, again, can serve both of them. And then again, at the end of the day, you also get a nicer or faster feedback loop. So it doesn't have to be data driven. It could be also qualitative, meaning you talk to the customers and you see what they feel about this. And then the last use case is around customization, essentially just serving different users, different experiences based on who they are. Sometimes it's licensing, sometimes it's geolocation related. You just want to serve different users, have one code base and just have different experiences for different users. So before I jump to the demo, actually, I'd like to show you guys a slide. So this is kind of an evolution of feature release. At the bottom, you see kind of the adoption of feature flags from the basic use case, the kill switch, doing more feature flags, feature management, and progressive delivery. But also on the Y column, you see kind of the feature flag coverage. And we've seen that the more companies do and leverage feature flags, the more they feel comfortable doing things like progressive delivery, which essentially is delivering the software based on the data. So again, it starts from the kill switch, just having that confidence to release something and turn it off if it breaks. And there's a lot of homegrown solutions in that space. Engineers at the end of the day, they need something, they build it themselves. And then once that is in place, usually you say, hey, I want to gradually release features based on whatever attribute I want. So that's kind of the next phase. And then you get into feature management, and feature management usually happens when companies starts to do feature flags at scale. So they have a lot of feature flags, and now they need to manage the life cycle of a feature flag. So when to add a feature flag, when to remove a feature flag, is that flag stale? Can I remove it from the code? And so you want to have a system that will help you do this. You want to maybe give other stakeholders aside from engineers the capabilities to use it. And so when you feel comfortable with that, you could get to the point where you do progressive delivery, where you actually based the release cycles on the data itself. And it could be engineering data, APM, observability, New Relic, Datadog, stuff like that. But it could also be user data, analytics, business KPIs. Okay, so I'm gonna show you guys a demo. And I'm going to do a demo of a single page web application. This is a JavaScript application, front end, back end, and I think it's Node. I'm going to do the feature flagging on the client side and basically show you how I gate some features, turn it off and on. And then I'll also talk about how we manage feature flags in terms of GitOps. And so again, this is a demo application. You can see it's hosted locally, a music application, various artists over here. I could go to one of them. And you can see that on the right side, I have this following 50 users tab. I want to gate this behind a feature flag and then control the exposure remotely. And so to do so, again, at the core, you have to add a feature flag. So I'm going to go to the code. Again, JavaScript, I'm only doing the feature flagging on the client side. And so this is a flag.js file. I'm basically importing the rollout SDK. I'm doing some setup code at the bottom over here, and then I define some flags in the code. And I've defined a few flags. If you could see that I've already defined a flag called following view. Now, what I want to do now is take these flags that I've already defined and gate some code with it. So I'm going to jump to a different file. This is a user.js file, and this is essentially a file that is basically rendering this screen that we can all see. And so I'm going to gate some code. So I'm going to add. I've just added flags.following view. If this is enabled, run this piece of code. Else just do nothing. I'm going to save. And once I've saved, the default value of this flag is false. And so we're going to go back over here, and we can see that this is gone. And so I just gated some a feature, and then I'm going to jump to rollouts dashboard. So this is rollouts dashboard. We have environments and some other things. And on the right side, you're seeing the active features that we're deploying. So what I want to do now is deploy that features that we've just gated. So I'm going to create a new experiment, and essentially this is the same as a deployment. I'm going to select the following view flag, and I'm going to set the audience. And we can see that by default the flag value is false for all versions and all users. I could change this to true, or I could do a split, meaning I deploy by percentage. Now, this is a very basic use case. What we've seen is that the more common use case is actually deployed by a specific criteria. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a new condition. And instead of deploying to everybody, I'm going to deploy to a subset of my user base. So I'm going to select property. And I've already exposed some of my application properties to rollout. So then I could use them in my deployment. So let's use email. I have email somewhere here. Yep. Okay, so user email, and then I'm going to do equals one of, and I'm just going to write my email. Nope, I write typing anything. And so what I've done now is that I've said, if the user has the user email that is equal this value, then give it a true value, otherwise give it a false value. And just to add some more clarity to this, if I go back to the code, we can see that at the bottom section over here, I've exposed some of my application properties to rollout. And so once I've done that, I can actually segment the deployment by these attributes. So I'm going to go back to over here. And again, this is very flexible. You can add more conditions. I've already created some groups of users that I want to deploy to. So I'm going to deploy to them as well. So let's deploy to internal employees and beta users. Let's give them, they're going to get the true value. I'm going to remove this condition for myself. And then everybody, and then let's have everybody else. Oh, you know what? Let's deploy to the DJ group, and they're going to get a split, a 10% deployment. So essentially what I've done now is I said, okay, everybody that is in a group called DJs, they're going to get a 10% deployment. If you're an internal employee or a beta user, you're going to see this feature. Otherwise, nobody's going to see this feature. And by the way, I've created these groups of users, both the internal employees, the beta users, and the DJs from this interface. There's a target group section. If you look at the DJs, you can see I'm looking at an attribute called playlist count. And if a user has a playlist count that is equal or larger than 100, 101, he's going to be in this group. And so now I'm basically deploying this feature. And one of the other things is that when you think about feature management or feature flags, one of the things you want to do is understand your feature deployment. So this dashboard allows you to gain some of that. You could see that we're basically measuring the how many time a flag is being evaluated and then distribution across the values. And so you get to see kind of your feature deployment progression. And my flag is not deployed yet to production, so it doesn't have any impression data at all. Now, again, James talked about this. One of the things that we have seen is that companies or engineering teams are used to working with Git, and they're used to having their own, to use Git as kind of the change management on their software lifecycle. And so, feature flags are basically circumventing the existing processes around how do you deploy. So we wanted to make sure that if companies still want to use their own processes, they can do so. So we have a nice integration with GitHub and Git. And so this is a GitHub repo that you own, and essentially only has feature flag data. And basically there's, we're saving anything that you configure over here into YAML configuration files. And then the idea is that if you go to experiment, we can look at the following view. This is a YAML file that represents the experiment we've just configured. And if I click on this, I get to see a YAML file representation of that deployment. And the nice thing is that if I change this either locally and then commit, or change this via the GitHub interface, the changes are going to propagate all the way. So I've just changed the percentage of the deployments to the GJ group to 55. I'm going to commit. I hope you guys write commit messages. This is a demo. I'm not going to write anything. I've just committed this. And now this, if I go back over here, this should be 55. And again, the idea is to leverage Git as that single source of changes for all software changes, including feature flags. And so you get the same governance, accountability, traceability that you get with Git. You could look at the history, you could roll back changes easily. You could, in this example, every environment is represented as a branch in this GitHub repo, so you can actually compare between environments. And so again, use the same tools that engineers are using today for managing feature flags as well. Now, the last thing is to talk about, okay, so we have this feature management control. We could do feature flags. How do we connect the dots in terms of the data? So again, very easy to connect this to your analytics solutions, either on the engineering side, observability, New Relic, Datadog, AppDynamics, whatever you guys use. Very easy to send the flag data to that and get a visualization of the status of my feature deployment. And you can do the same with your user analytics or business KPIs, so mixed panel, amplitude, omniture, whatever you guys are using. It's very easy to integrate with that and actually see the impact of feature delivery to your software. So I think I'm going to stop now and go to Q&A.
Excellent. Well, we have a couple questions in so far, but if you have a question, please use your GoToWebinar control panel and go ahead and submit it. And let's go ahead and dive right on in. First question, over multiple years of development, releases will feature over multiple years of development, releases will feature flags be our future technical debt as the complexity of years of flags become the issue, I guess, piling it on.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think one of the biggest concern teams have with feature flags is the technical overhead, both in terms of adding the feature flag but also removing them. And I think the best companies that I've seen that work with feature flag have a process around managing the life cycle. And the tools, again, at the end of the day, are there to help you manage that. So when you think about this, a lot of the flags are meant to help with a deployment or a safer deployment, right? So at the end of the day, once everybody's getting the same value on that feature flag, everybody's getting that feature as it should be, you could potentially remove that flag. And so companies that are working good with feature flag have a process around that, and they remove feature flags from the code base. So the idea is not to stay with a lot of features or feature flags in the code base. The idea is to remove those. Some of them are going to stay there forever because they're instrumental, but a lot of them are going to get removed. Yeah.
Okay, great. Next question, is there an audit record of changes?
Sorry, by the way, can I just jump in a little? I mean, I think
yeah, go right ahead.
There's a simpler answer, which is yes. Definitely feature flag craft can and will be an issue. I think that's one of the reasons why we want a good management platform for that. I think that there are even examples of organizations where, for example, they didn't realize it was a flag. Then they go and make a system change later on and actually have downtime, which is of course the opposite of the reasons we used feature flags in the first place. So there's definitely a set of disciplines around this, and indeed I think that's why we need well maintained platforms to help us do this more effectively.
All right, well said. Okay, so next question then. Is there an audit record of changes in flag settings?
Yeah, of course. All of the platforms supplied an audit log of all changes that happened, of course, the environment, and of course, feature flags specifically. If you use a solution like ours, in the example that I've done with GitOps or Git, you get the change management. I mean, you get the audit log inside Git, so that's also a value. But yes, definitely, and of course, that could be connected to other external change management solutions.
Okay, great. All right, next question. Let's see, how do you manage features that are tied to database schema changes and may require data migration to new schema?
Yeah, so it's a good question. That's always a challenge, and it's important to understand that feature flags, at the end of the day, engineers need to implement them and they need to think. It's not it's not like a silver bullet that requires no thinking. So there's some situation where it's more complicated adding feature flags. Database is one of them, but again, have been done before. I would say to that point that I've seen a lot of time that feature flags are being used actually when doing things like database migration to gradually make sure where because that's usually a place where there's a lot of risk inherited. So feature flags can be used to actually have a safer path to migrating into a database. But there's not always an easy path to add feature flags.
All right then. Let's see, next question. And if you have a question, please, it's not too late. Go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit it. Next question, how do teams promote feature flags through a continuous delivery pipeline along with the respective artifacts so the flags are on, off as expected as artifacts are deployed into new environments? We wouldn't want to have a manual process at each stage.
Yeah, so of course, platforms have REST APIs, and these can be used in any type of pipeline. The idea is that you want to, again, check things in your QA, in your development environment, and then promote them gradually into production. And definitely REST APIs can be used, and again, Git can be used as well to kind of automate a process around how do we manage the promotion between environments of feature flags.
All right. Great. Next question, and this is a good one. What role should be responsible for setting feature flags? Should it be devs or IT ops or business? And how easy is it to allow developers to access their feature flags without allowing devs to affect prod environments?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think James also talked about some of this in his presentation. So one of the things that we're seeing is that at the core, engineers are the ones that are adding the feature flag. It's a technical tool and technique, and so engineers are the ones that are adding those. In many cases, the product team or IT team would ask for feature flags, specifically if they know if they are aware of these capabilities, and so they would ask for those. But at the end of the day, the engineers would add those to the code base. Now, permissions is that's what the added value, or part of what the added value that the platform give. We allow permissions across environments, across experiments, and so you can decide to create groups of users that have specific permissions to specific deployments. The idea is that there's always going to be feature flags that are owned by the engineering team because they're technical, they're just for the safety component, just want to make sure that you're not breaking any things. And then as feature flags are becoming more and more prevalent and more stakeholders are using them, including IT, including product, some of the feature flags are going to be owned by the product. And so they're the ones that are going to say, hey, we're in charge of that release. Thank you for adding that feature flag. We're going to take it from here. And I think that the magic with feature flag is that, again, James talked about this, it kind of breaks that silos between engineering and product and other teams, and it allows kind of a more, just allowing an environment that the team can work more together as a team, as opposed to just engineering releasing something.
Yeah, I mean, I think this, I mean, frankly, we should, I mean, look, we all know that we should be working more collaboratively across functions. I think that what people tend to not like are surprises. And I think what feature flags give us is the opportunity to try things and experiment without unpleasant surprises. So in terms of, ownership, it's going to kind of depend. But I do think one of the key issues is absolutely there are things that frankly are and remain operational issues. I mean, if we think about the way modern IT organizations look, you've got a sort of a platform team. They are in charge of curating a set of experiences that are used by developers, and they do DevOps. Then you've got a development team that is building business functionality using these services and tools that have been curated by Ops. But the application team also does DevOps. So I think that frankly, that both constituencies will be using feature flags. And then obviously you've got to be able to have a conversation with the business, because it should be the business that decides when new functionality is rolled out. I mean, I think traditionally, when we had this world of waterfall, and the business would work with IT, you had your 300-page requirements document, you sent that offshore, you waited 18 months for that to come back. We lived in a world of one feature release a year. Everything was, obviously a lot slower. We had, pretty well-defined roles here. All organizations want to move faster. And so thinking about feature management in the context of, as I say, allowing experimentation with less risk, and indeed putting different constituencies in control of when features are rolled out. I think that's the promise here. We're only just getting to that now, but frankly, it should be that all of these constituencies are collaborating.
Excellent. Okay. Lots of great questions here. Okay, next question. How do I ensure that the feature flag service isn't a single point of failure? If rollout is down, what happens to my app?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. When we built rollout, the idea was how do we make sure that we alleviate that concern completely? And so the entire architecture is kind of stateless. So every time you add a feature flag, it has a default value. So there's not a single flag that doesn't have a value. And then the flag evaluation happens on the end device. So essentially, rollout, basically what we supply is, we have SDKs across many languages. At the end, the SDK pulls a JSON configuration file and evaluates the flag on the end device, so that even if rollout is done, there's no implication to your services. The flag always have values, and the worst that can happen is that you won't be able to change a value of a feature flag. But then we're not in the position that we would break your application.
All right. Great, great. Okay, next question. It seems in Agile, the stand-up and initial scope should talk about if and when flags, so everyone is aware of the intent and use case. I guess that's more of a statement than a question. Any thoughts on that?
Could you repeat the statement?
Oh, go ahead, Erez.
Yeah, sure. It seems in Agile, the stand-up and initial scope should talk about if and when flags, so everyone is aware of the intent and use case.
Got it. James, go ahead. I have some thoughts.
Yeah, I think as much as anything else, the use of feature flags becomes an expectation. So, indeed, in that stand-up or in that meeting where you're working out what the next set of features are, it will be very much with a view that those will be delivered as feature flags. So the stakeholders come at it from the perspective of understanding from the word go, like, you might say, for example, there are 3 different things we'd like to try, and therefore we should have those 3 feature flags. Then be like, well, what are the constituencies that we should roll this out to? Indeed, is that decision-making criteria? Is it about geography? Is it about, as I say, in-house employees or customers or other third parties? I think that should be very much part of the conversation, because what we're talking about is understanding the criteria before we begin to roll this out. So yeah, I think the if statement should be one of the first discussions in any sprint.
So just my perspective on this, one of the things that we're trying to do as a company that builds a feature flagging or feature management platform is to make it easier or seamless to add feature flags. And so we, like, internally, of course, we use feature flags all the time, and we're trying to get to that point where everything is gated behind feature flags. So it's a seamless action. So you don't have to think about this. All the engineers, everybody on the team know that everything they do, every pull request should be behind the feature flags. Now, it's not easy getting there, but that's what the platforms, or at least ourselves, are trying to do. Because at the end of the day, when you want to reach that progressive delivery, the experimentation, these areas are more sophisticated. If you have, yes, you could state in the stand-up, yeah, hey guys, we need to add a feature flags because we want to test this and that, and that's fine, and it happens all the time. But what we've seen is that in order for that to really happen, in a manner that is continuous and just repeated, you have to have feature flags become seamless. And so kind of, today in rollout internally, there's not a single line of, well, maybe 90% is gated behind feature flags. And you have to have a very good excuse to not add feature flags, to convince that that's complicated or, unnecessary. And so everybody knows that they add feature flags all the time.
All right, great. Okay, next question. Let's see. What are the 2 to 3 things that we should consider when selecting a feature flag management solution?
So I would not build this myself. I mean, as a team, I've seen a lot of homegrown solutions in that space. And I think it's great to get going initially. You start with like a kill switch or something, but at one point, more stakeholders want a piece of this, and it becomes complicated. So on that front, just avoid adding, just building this on your own. And when you look at a platform, you have to think about, what is that you're looking to accomplish? Is this more on the experimentation side? Is this more on the safety and speed side, in the engineering side? Would the platform help me be more, just write more feature flags? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to give a tool to your engineering teams, your product team, that they would not use. So the idea is can I find a platform that would facilitate and improve how my team is doing feature flags? And I think that's key, and that's at least what we're looking at doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, I'm seeing it as, the integration with platforms that you're using, and or frankly, where the vendor is going. Feature flags, as I say, I think, Erez sort of sees, a lot of the competition is stuff that people have built in-house. But I think the interesting question becomes, well, okay, if I'm going to build something that is managed by a vendor, then in that case, what else do we want this integrated with? So, we do want it to be integrated with our broader testing infrastructures. We do want it to be integrated with a set of data and metrics, so that we can become more effective. The question I thought was good, is there a single point of failure? Clearly, you don't want feature flags to be that. So is this robust? So I think robustness, integration, integration of what is pre-canned, i.e. what does it already integrate with in terms of your existing software delivery tools, and yeah, where is the vendor going to take it from a metrics perspective? Those would be some of the key decision-making factors that I'd be looking at.
All right, great. Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll close out the question and answer period time. This looks really interesting, so there you have it. How do you recommend a team who isn't using feature flags get started?
Yeah, so one of the nicest thing about feature flags that I've seen is that the ROI is very high. I mean, it's super easy to get started. You don't have to go all in. A lot of people are afraid, oh, I have this huge code base, how would I start feature flagging? It doesn't matter what you have in terms of the previous or legacy software. You just implement a feature flag, just have one feature flag, build a process around that, see how that is benefiting the organization, and then start adding more. And so it's very easy to get going. I think it's easier for front-end teams. That's at least from what I've seen. To get going, it's visually, I guess it's easier to see what you're turning off and on. But again, any team can start easy, one feature flag at a time, and then grow as you see the value.
All right, great. Yeah, it looks like that is all the questions we have. So I'll go ahead and close out the question and answer period for today. Thanks so much to everybody who did submit questions. There were some really good ones there. So they were all really good, actually. So Thank you so much for that. Also want to remind the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of it, or if you just want to watch it again, you have the opportunity to do so later on. Following today's event, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. Let's see. Also, the webinar is going to be on the devops.com website, so you can always go find it there. Just go to devops.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. Before we get things closed out for the day, I did promise you at the top of the hour that we'd be doing a drawing for 3 $50 Amazon gift cards. So why don't we go ahead and do that real quick. Our first winner is Brett L. Congratulations, Brett. Second winner is Susan H. Congratulations, Susan. And our third winner is Patrick S. Congratulations to all three of you. We'll be contacting you following today's webinar with by email with your Amazon gift cards. So look out for that email. All right, guys. James and Erez, thank you both so much for such a great presentation. I especially love watching the demos. So good stuff there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Great. I want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody.